Who holds the keys to advertising's future? No, it's not AI. It's the people who actually do the work. And leaders need to recognize that if we want the business to have a future worth a damn. Today's guest on the DesuckifyWork Podcast has been fighting this fight for a while. Jack Skeels is the CEO and founder of Agency Agile, a group that helps agencies and other companies create cultures that bring out the best in teams and chart a new way of being for managers and leaders. New way of being? It sounds kind of scary until you understand what it actually means. Quieting the craziness in the agency world. It means finally getting a handle on scope creep. It means getting work done faster because you're focused only on what matters. And it means trusting your teams to do the work they're paid to do so you can spend more time on big picture thinking and everyone can be a whole lot happier. That last bit is the crux of Jack's new book, Unmanaged, which demonstrates how managing less can help you manage better. Counterintuitive? Perhaps. But if you've spent more than 5 minutes at an agency, it also sounds pretty refreshing. So let's sit back and let Jack show us how to unthink everything we thought we knew about this crazy business. Okay, Jack Skeels, welcome to the DesuckifyWork Podcast.
Hey, TJ, great to be here today. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, likewise. I like what you do. You've got a company called Agency Agile, and that's the ad agency world, which is my home. And I'd love to give you a chance to at least give a quick rundown of what you do there, and then I'll kind of poke around with some questions and try to go a little deeper. But can you give the quick elevator pitch of what Agency Agile is?
Yeah. And we started out, as you might gather, in doing Agile sort of work for agencies back in 2010. And we basically figured out a program that doesn't use a lot of Agile. So it's sort of false advertising on our part. But we have a program that largely is how to make people work better together. And we've been able to improve workplaces in over 200 agencies and other knowledge worker organizations. So that's our day job, is to go out and teach people how to be better together.
Well, I think that's very necessary. I mean, not shocking coming from a guy who has a DesuckifyWork podcast. And I spent 27 years in advertising, and it is a very interesting environment that could certainly use some improvement, to say the least. I think almost anybody, even those of us who really love the work and love working in that space, have come up against some struggles, with how we work. As you've observed, particularly the agency world, and I suppose anything else as well, what's your take on kind of the state of the world of work right now? Where does it fit on the suck meter, if you will?
I was going through some research reports, and I saw something from 2021, which is fairly recent, from one of the big consulting firms, maybe McKinsey, but it may have been Bain, I forget which. And it was a long deck that basically pointed out how unhappy managers are. And with the idea, and the whole pitch was, we need to figure out a new way of managing and the like. And I felt like raising my hand when I'm reading this thing. I'm like, we know how to do that, right? But I think that reflects one side of the coin, and one side of the coin is managers feel increasingly frustrated about, what is the right thing to do? And part of that is today's organizations, especially at agencies, but everywhere else, have gotten incredibly complex with multi-managers and matrix management, multi-matrix management, multi-projects, et cetera. But if we flip over to the other side, which is really, I think maybe you do want to desuckify work for managers, but I think certainly you do want to do that for workers, right?
Yeah,
for makers.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the other side of that coin, is that makers and workers feel incredibly overmanaged, and they are. In fact, we've proven that. But it's just, we have an epidemic of overmanagement right now.
What does overmanagement look like?
Well, so the original idea behind managing was, and this goes back to I go into this in the book, the the original idea of managing was because we had very illiterate workers coming into an industrial workplace. We had immigrants and rural farm workers, maybe speaking no English or having little or no education, coming to work into a factory, and you had to have someone who knew everything supervising them. In fact, the word manager, I don't know if you know this, the word manager traces its roots back to what's called animal husbandry. In other words, it meant to care for livestock.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. Okay. So that's pretty dark, right?
Yes.
And we sort of never lost that. But the problem was back then, which it was still not the best way to do things, but you would only have one manager.
Right.
And so it was a very simple relationship, and you could actually tie productivity to the manager and say, well, if your people aren't producing, then you must be doing something wrong. The problem now is with these multi-manager environments and multi-project environments, productivity loss doesn't get assigned to any manager. Okay. And so what that means is that managers are unconstrained, if you will. There's no metric to find out how much productivity a manager is killing. And in fact, managers do kill productivity.
What are managers doing to kill productivity?
I think one is managers are trying to be managers. Okay. So one real interesting idea behind this is that one interesting idea behind this is the act of managing is actually contrary to production. In other words, the more you manage, the more what they call managerial intensity, which is the number of managers times the amount of activity that they do. The greater the managerial intensity inside of an organization, the lower the productivity of the organization. So in the broad strokes, the act of managing actually decreases productivity. So the question is, what if you say we had no managers? How do we do? We probably need some managers. Okay. Yeah. Then what is that? What's that zone? Where's that proper balance point? And that's why the book that I wrote, Unmanaged. I mean, just trying to push people in that direction that maybe we don't need to manage as much.
I love the title. I mean, it's certainly provocative, but I think it speaks to what you're talking about. So when you without sort of giving the whole book away, is there an example of how one can unmanage or demanage a bit and show up in a way that leads to more productivity and better outcomes for everybody?
Yeah, and so we would need several hours for me to give the book away. So no worries. It's 340 pages or something like that. I was shocked how many words I was able to put out.
Nice.
There's a conundrum, like, because a manager every day has hundreds, maybe 1,000 different moments in which they can decide, should I do something or not, right? And you can't even enumerate them all. This is a big problem in business research. I worked at a think tank for about 6 years, and so one of the problems in business research is that every business is different, right? So you can't actually. There are a lot of things you can't say about business because you can't get enough data points that are the same, right? And so a given manager works in a given company in a given industry with a given set of employees, and no other manager has that situation, right? So the challenge is, how can I give advice on those 1,000 moments every day, right? And so we sort of went the other way, which is, if in fact you did a really good job at several key moments of the day and basically did almost nothing during the rest of the moments, you'd actually be an amazing manager. So what we're trying to do is subtract the moments that are ambiguous. Fine, just you're better off not doing anything in a lot of ways. And the moments that do matter, you've got to be there in the correct way. And so we define what we call the 4 key managerial moments. And they include this idea of that's why. The first 3 are why, what, and go, which is the natural production cycle. Why are we doing this? What's the need behind it? All that kind of thing. How does it fit into the world? What is it that we're doing, right? The scope. A lot of times that's called scope, right? The first one's called context. Second one's called scope. And go, of course, is go do it, right? And what's happened with management now is that the over managing happens in why and what, and not in the way that it should. the overmanaging happens by managers thinking that they own the why and what. And then they ask people to do the go. They ask people to do the work without understanding what the work is, why it's that way. And I see you nodding. That's the eternal situation in agency.
Yes.
Someone working on a piece of creative or copy and looking at someone going, why are we doing this again?
Oh
right.
my gosh.
And not understanding what the client wants. So those are three of those moments, how you behave. And I go into a lot of detail, and they aren't simple answers. But I go into a lot of detail about some of the things you need to master.
Yeah, I'm nodding my head because yes, I think I have definitely worked on things where I'm like, I'm not really sure what the point of this is, but I'll do it. And then, I've been a part of the managerial swirl where we're clearly not helping people. Like you can just feel it. It's like nobody, and I think, there's a word that shows up for me, and I'm curious how this comes up in your world, but accountability is a word that in agencies, it's almost like a hot potato. It's kind of like, I don't know if I want that, or well, let's design a system where it's impossible for any one person or any one team to have it. So how do you help get accountability into the system and get people to really embrace that?
Well, so it's a very dangerous word. I'll start with that. Okay. Because let's just talk about what it means. Does it mean, how do we make sure that workers are getting all the work done that they're supposed to get done? So I think that's the most popular interpretation, right?
Yeah.
Is that sort of where you take it? Okay.
So well, I'll say I take it in two places, right? I take it there, but I also take it to the leadership level of who really owns this thing, right? Because I think when you talk about, matrixed organizations and multiple projects, or even a project where there's multiple teams and there's team leads, and you just have like, okay, who makes the decision here ultimately? Who owns that decision? And then who is accountable for how that decision impacted the work? And then, I think from a worker standpoint, it's almost like you want to provide, empowerment is probably the more positive term, but some ability to know, like, what do I own here? What am I responsible for? And how do I know when I've done a good job?
Yeah. And so let me use your definitions, and I'll sort of untangle that. I always I'm always shocked when I hear a manager say accountability, especially when directed towards an employee and employee performance, because a worker, because the hardest job in the agency is to be a worker in the agency. Okay. You are multi-managed to death. Any given day, you can have 5 to 10 different types of managers, account managers, project managers, department managers, literally just swooping and pooping, coming by you over and over, like, hey, can you work on this? Do you have a minute? Hey, I need to squeeze this in, that kind of thing. It's almost like the organization, the managerial structure is designed to make you less productive in the day. Okay. The bravest worker. Okay. So when managers use accountability to say, our people aren't getting the stuff done that they should, as in, like, why aren't they claiming it? It's because of the managers. Okay. All the workers want to do is get work done, right? And the managers getting in the way. I love what you said about managerial accountability. And I think there are a couple things in there. One of which is managers want to be responsible for the work. And what we really want to do is actually hand responsibility to the team. And it's the fight, there are two things that happen. One is managers aren't good at agreeing on what needs to be done. And so we have a bunch of different opinions. And since no one's in charge, those different opinions clash. And where the battleground for opinions is right at the worker's desk. Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah. No, you shouldn't have done it that way. Well, Angela, the creative director, said to do it that way. Yeah. No, well, that's not going to work. I can tell you right now. And I'm just sitting here going, I don't know what to do. I got two people telling me to do different things. That's the battleground for the lack of management organization, if you will. It's the problem with the multi-manager environment.
Yeah. So how do you sort of start to detangle that and create some managerial accountability that leads to the kind of clarity that workers need and their ability to then take responsibility for what they need to?
Yeah. And so that's why I bring up that 1920s example. Okay. Because the workers back then were admittedly, you probably couldn't even use the language you needed to explain to them what was going on, right? You just, show them, move this to here, pull this lever, that kind of thing.
Right.
The opposite is true today. In fact, our knowledge workers are ridiculously capable of learning and ridiculously motivated. And the idea that managers should hold knowledge inside their head and not distribute it is messed up. Okay. But it's one that is stuck with us because of the history of this hierarchical managerial model.
Yeah.
I'm the smartest person in that department, so I should be in charge, and I'm going to keep myself as the smartest person, right?
Yeah.
And so this denying of the handoff of information and handoff of control that's done by managers these days, and the managers compete for that control, right? Okay, who, like you just the question you said was actually a compete for control. Who is in charge?
Yeah.
Who's in charge is actually the client and the team. Okay,
Yeah.
because the team needs to build what the client wants, and the client needs to make sure the team knows what they want. When they agree, when those two scopes align, then you get great delivery.
Yeah.
But instead, all the managers think, well, we need to be the smartest ones. We're smarter than the client. We're smarter than the team. And it's a shit show.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. And so that's what we do. We change that. We flip that around and show agencies and other organizations how to actually lead with their teams and how to get deeply connected with the client. And the rework rate, which is the disaster rate inside an agency, usually 30%. We overspend on a project by about 30%. Rework rate shrinks to almost nothing when you do that.
Oh, wow. God. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy that number doesn't even slightly shock me because it's you just experience it.
Yeah. Isn't it funny? Yeah.
It's funny. I mean, I love the term you used before about managers swooping and pooping. I thought that was like so evocative of how it actually feels. And you can kind of almost hear the cackles of the birds kind of coming in and just like dropping these awful bombs. And then you have the person sitting there going, I don't know. Well, Steve said to do this and Mary said to do this. And I don't know. And then the brief says this. So what the heck? Like, so what does it start to look like when you start to right the ship? I mean, what does a more unmanaged workplace look like particularly for the teams who are doing the work? How do they, what is a typical project show up for them like?
Well, and I opened the book with a great example of this. The moment that I had to try it out, because I'd been a researcher before and I started to write a book on how to do this. And then I realized I had never done it. Right. And so I got a job at an agency and I waited, and there's this big bad project. I call it the Project on Fire. I opened the book with it. And it was a brave crew of 15 people trying to build this massive website for a video game launch. And they were being supervised by, and I don't have the exact count, but my business partner was one of the managers at the time, and I'd forgotten counting him. So I think it's at least 11 managers over 15 people.
Oh, wow.
Because this is like the single largest video game publisher or one of the top two. Actually, I'm not sure what the ranking was at the time. So every manager was like, I'm going to help, and the project was getting farther and farther behind schedule. I'm sure you've been on one of those, right? You've got 10 weeks to go and you've got 15 weeks of work to do. And then you got 8 weeks to go, 2 weeks ago. But now you got 20 weeks of work to do. It's just you can tell that scope is out of control and the project's out of control. I came in and I removed all the managers except for one.
Wow.
Okay. And I said to the team, what do we need to do to get this project done? And they just dead silence. I was sitting with the whole team. And I said, no, I don't know either, because I just jumped on this project. I said, you can't look to me. And we kicked everyone else out of the room. What do you guys need to do to finish this project? And we spent a whole day in that conversation capturing everything that they could think of. And they're all video game guys. So they really cared and thought about this thing. Okay. It wasn't that they didn't have any interest in it. They were deeply interested in it. They made a plan and they killed it. We got it 97% of the functionality done on time, and the client loved it. Okay. The team rescued the project. Okay. Managers can't rescue projects. Teams can. And so what it looks like is the team took control of the whole project. Yes, we had a project manager. Yes, I played the account manager. Yes, we still had department managers who had to fight off with burning sticks and stuff like that. But basically, we just let people get work done. And the boost in productivity literally doubled the productivity of the team, right? They made up all that time and then some.
I mean, so when I hear that, I think, well, why aren't we just all doing that, first and foremost? And I think the answer then shows up pretty quickly in my head because, I think you even mentioned this in your site at some point somewhere, but this idea that you're asking agencies to dramatically shift the model that they have. And in my experience, even though, we're rooted in this idea of helping clients create change and all that, agencies are super resistant to change, super fixed in their mindsets. And so when you walk in the door and say, I've got this completely new model here, how are agencies reacting at first?
Yeah, no, there's, look, we used to go out because we had such these topics are very interesting. And most of this material, at least the conceptual stuff, we've had since day one. The idea of the loss of productivity and why it happens and all that kind of thing. Any agency in the world would take my phone call. Okay. Any agency would pull its leadership team together for me to spend an hour and a half and tell this to them. And how many sales did we get out of that? 0. Okay. What it takes is an agency that wants to do better, that really wants to do better from the top down. And an agency that says, we admit that we don't know how to do this. Right. And so that's that critical step, just like with personal stuff. Like if you want to actually become a better partner or something like that, you got to say, okay, I probably suck as a partner in some ways, maybe a lot of ways. And so I'm going to start taking steps. Like I'll take some humility and go see a therapist or, whatever steps you want to take. But that's what the agency needs to do. We work almost exclusively with hand raisers. Okay? And it generally has to be a CEO level hand raiser, or C level at least, that says we need to do something different. They're out there. Like I said, we've worked with over 220 now, and we continue to get, agencies that just at some point the business gets so hard, and some people say it shouldn't be this hard. What could we do instead? And that's where you call us, basically.
I've certainly been in many of those situations, and honestly, most of the time you don't know who to call, and then you just kind of double down on what you've already done and think, if I just work harder, if all 11 of us managers just manage even harder, we'll figure this damn thing out. So I think we're just digging a deeper hole often. I want to come back to the name of the company because Agency Agile certainly evokes that you guys are rooted in agile practices. And it sounds like that's kind of like some of the core practices may have come from there, but you've really evolved this into something completely different. So what is actually still kind of rooted in the world of agile, and what's different?
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually had I used pre-agile techniques. Like there was one called IEPM, Iterative Enhanced Project Management. I used that back in the 80s. And it looks like plan what you're going to do for the next 2 weeks, do it, and then show it to the client, which anyone who knows anything will say that's a sprint, right? That's just a basic. So I had to use some of those techniques. And then of course, everyone was screaming agile in the early 2000s. And I was like, yeah, I know how to do that stuff. No big deal. It turns out only about 30% of that stuff really does what you need to do. But the big idea that I absolutely stole, is in Agile, in software Agile. If we have a 2-week sprint, what is the rule for the managers? So on day one, the managers get to talk to the team about what's going to happen for the next 2 weeks, right? Okay. And then days 2 through, and on day 10, the managers get to see what the team did and they get to talk about it with the team. What's the rule for managers between days 2 and 9? Do you know what it is? It's not in the manifesto or anything like that.
I don't know
what the rule is?
Stay the hell away. I'm not sure.
Stay the fuck away from the team. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. And that's where the productivity comes from, is that we say, team, what do you need to know to get this thing done? We spend time with them. We send a focus day, and then we go do it. Even if you do some of it wrong, you're going to get so much more done. Right. And so that basic concept that we need to unmanage teams so they can actually get more done is the idea that I leveraged. And then it leads to all these other questions like you've been asking, like then what do managers do?
Yeah.
Or how do we do that in a multi-project environment, a multi-manager environment? What does that mean for me as a project manager? All
Hmm.
that stuff we've had to figure out and more and more.
Yeah.
So it has rudiments in Agile because there were things that worked that weren't really Agile. They, like I said, the sprint preceded software Agile by 18 years, right? So
Okay.
we're using just good human techniques, but
Hmm.
Agile is a good word. It's sort of on the decline,
Yeah.
and we're changing the name of our company within the next month or two to
Okay.
Better Company
Mm.
is our new brand. So because that's really what we're doing, we're making
Yeah.
better company.
Well, it's interesting because I think I have the creative background. Agile scares me a little bit, and I don't even really know why, other than it feels sort of overly regimented in my head. And I'm like, where am I going to be creative? And then you describe like, well, you got 10 days to just be creative. And I'm like, well, that sounds cool.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know what I
yeah,
mean? So
yeah.
it's like, there could be something about like helping people to see that this is just a better way to do things. And it gives you more freedom actually to get the work done. And you mentioned the question of, well, now what do managers do? And that question does show up for me because part of the work I do is coaching people who are, moving into the world of leadership and figuring out how to be
Mhm.
a leader. Um, how do you show up as a leader in this better company space? What does that look like?
Well, yeah, like I said, there are the four key managerial moments. So they're specific things that are contrary to current practice that you need to do. And of course,
Hmm.
like that 8-day window that we just talked about is the key mindset for the
Hmm.
go. I said why, what, go, right? The
Hmm.
key mindset is stay away from the team until they need you, right?
Yeah.
So that's a behavior. And there are ways to implement that so that you don't have to go up to the team all the time saying, "Hey, do you need me? Hey, do you need
Hmm.
me?"
Yeah.
So that there are ways to do that and the like. And in a sense, in the multi-manager environment, there's always enough going on. You do need less project managers, of course, because the
Hmm.
team can kind of self-manage and the like.
Yeah.
But there's all one of the things is if I have a manager, usually they're a very skilled person.
Hmm.
And if you look at what they spend most of their time doing, it's not highly skilled work.
Hmm.
It's chasing down status of things and trying to sort out what the scope is, anyways, or
Yep.
apologizing to the client because you missed the mark on what you submitted, all
Hmm.
those things. And if we take those off of the manager's plate, think of the things they could do instead. Okay.
Hmm.
They could start talking to the client proactively, right? I
Hmm.
can start thinking about where we want to take the client next instead of
Hmm.
apologizing for where we didn't get them, right? Get
Yeah.
them to, right?
Hmm.
Um, I think department managers are the same thing. It's the switch from being the firefighter who comes in and tries to rescue every campaign or project. I can
Hmm.
start thinking about where does my department need to go? What
Hmm.
skills do I need to bring? What's the
Yeah.
future of creative or content or whatever, right?
Hmm.
But I don't have time to do that. Those are all nice to haves.
Yeah.
Okay. But the must have is actually we need to get this done or the client's going to be pissed and fired us. Right.
Mm.
So when we start solving that problem of the constant crisis of the agency,
Hmm.
managers actually you can do one or two things. The other thing is you can go back to doing what you were doing before, right?
Yeah.
You can be a designer still, right?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Be a developer.
Hmm.
Or you can take the higher path and say, I'm going to be about making this craft better, helping
Hmm.
find better people, helping sell the next client, that kind of thing.
Well, I love all of that because, yeah, it's the biggest frustration I think for a leader is to sit here and go, I want to be doing all of those things. I want to be proactive. I want to spend more time thinking about the kinds of people we need on our team as we grow. I want to nurture talent. I want
Hmm.
to give them
Yeah.
opportunities to learn and grow. And anybody who works in advertising knows is you barely get time to do any of that. There's certainly very little formal of that at all, like training.
Yeah. Yeah.
And certainly for me, as I think about some of the work that I do as a coach, I'm all I want to do is help people get those things. But I think if you can give leaders a chance to take that on and spend X percent, which is hopefully a healthy chunk of their time on that, and then the rest of the time is just showing up for those moments when you're most needed, and then like you said, stay the fuck away. I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think, I mean, it's honestly, it's probably music to a lot of people's ears to hear about that. Um, the other
Well,
thing you
people.
mentioned is the client relationship and being able to
Mm.
nurture that. And I'm sure this is true in any industry, but God, the agency client relationship is just the most screwed up thing ever. Like it seems so like designed to have you pitted against each other, even though you're supposed to be collaborative partners. Um, how does this process help that turn into something that's actually worthwhile and productive?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do want to point out, I'm going to say something here, but you can also see the longer version on our website. We've got
Okay.
on-demand videos
Mm-hmm.
that look for what's called the future of agencies.
Mm.
I did a project, a multi-year project with the 4As, the American Association of
Yeah.
Advertising Agencies, to study the future of agencies with their top technologist, a guy named
Mm-hmm.
Chick Foxgrover, great guy.
Mm-hmm.
And um, and one of the things that we looked at is because the consultancies are buying agencies and the like,
Mm-hmm.
and we looked at what's the difference between the way a consultancy treats clients and the way an agency treats clients. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a whole bunch of it. I'd go through this in a lot of detail,
Yeah.
but there's a very interesting little point there, which is agencies think their clients are stupid. Okay, consultancies think their clients are learners.
Mm.
Okay, that the consultancy says my job is to educate my client and grow their skill set,
Mm-hmm.
and they will be loyal and thankful for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
An agency, literally, there's a survey done by Campaign from 2019 that says surveying agency personnel, the single greatest challenge they face in work is the client. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
that's crazy toxic. So,
Yeah.
so obviously, what we did, knowing that, and I'd done it before, but it amplified what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is, how do I, as an agency, bring my client along on the journey?
Mm-hmm.
How do I teach them about the way that we think?
Mm-hmm.
Because the more an agency, the more I'm sorry, because the more a client understands about the way the agency thinks,
Mm-hmm.
that's a job skill for them, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And
Mm-hmm.
there's knowing agencies and knowing how to read agencies and manage them, but you need to understand that beast, right? And so we do a whole thing where part of the process, we spend a whole day coaching an agency through walking through with a real client on a real project, how
Mm.
to get that client educated about the project. It's amazing. It's amazing. Clients are like, I want to do this every time. Right.
Wow.
Clients love it. Okay. And you have $1 million project. All you need to do is spend a day with the client and it changes the whole relationship and changes the project.
Mm.
So it's crazy. These aren't big investments, but
Yeah.
they're really counterintuitive and contrary to the current practice, certainly.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. The whole thing reminds me of the basically a joke in the industry where you just like, yeah, I'd love my job if it weren't for the damn clients. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. No,
what
exactly.
that's
Yeah.
what so many of us say, and it's I think it's it's almost nobody's fault. It's baked into the DNA of how things have just been going for years and years. It's just like for whatever reason, yeah, a lot of agencies think the client's dumb. And a lot of clients think that the agency is kind of like frivolous and out there just like spinning their wheels on their own thing and not really caring or connected to what the business problems are. And then you just see that show up every day versus the very simple dichotomy of like, we have some information, some knowledge that's useful, and we want to help you learn and develop those skills so we can grow together. Well, God, that sounds so damn simple.
And,
And yet
and
we don't do it.
and people are shocked at the essentially the agency turnover rate, right?
Oh,
how
God,
how
yeah.
quickly clients fire agencies because there's no
Mhm.
loyal in a relation. Yeah, it's like you've got a good looking, you're dating someone who's really good looking, but he or she is a really obnoxious person. At some
Mhm.
point the obnoxiousness builds up that the good looking part doesn't matter, right? And
Yeah.
you're going to move on. And that's that it's that look, I think the bravest. So I said I think the workers are the bravest people inside the agency. The
Mhm.
bravest person in the agency client relationship is the client because
Mhm.
every client has gone through multiple agencies.
Yeah.
Their ability to believe that this agency will be different, despite no good evidence that they will be,
Mhm.
is amazing. It's simply you got to think they're just like flipping over rocks trying to find a piece of gold, and it's always a piece of dirt under there. That kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I think it reminds me of a question I've asked some people and I've thought about, which is like, if you were to design a business structure to service the needs of clients in the area of advertising and marketing and content and all that, would it look anything like what most agencies look like? And I think most people go, no, it wouldn't, and what scares people about that is, well, then what the hell is it? And what I'm hearing a little bit is like, it's not that it's not doable. It's just, you just got to be willing to get out of your own way.
Yeah, very much.
And make some actually fairly straightforward and simple changes, but you have to hold yourself to them versus kind of just digging your heels in and then, trying to kind of manage yourself out of it,
Yeah. It's interesting because it's one of the key ideas in change and transformation management is, one is whether the organization is aligned on the change. We talked about that. But another idea is, do they have the muscle for doing it? And, in others, do they have the natural skills for doing it? Yeah. And one of the things we see, for example, is that traditional agencies have a much harder time doing this, right, than digital agencies. Like the very digital agency changes its model every 3 years, right? So it's like, okay, we're going to do it this way because they have to, because of new technology, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The interesting thing that makes it really, really hard is in the digital agencies get good at doing that, despite a thing inside of agencies, which is, in an agency, most managers feel like they can do whatever they want as long as the work gets done. Everything is excusable if the client loved it and you got it done on time and we made some money off of it, right? And so what that says is there is no process in an agency. There are processes, and they're all idiosyncratic to the account, to the manager that we're referring to the situation of the project. And so to say we're going to go to an orchestrated way of doing things differently says, first of all, you don't have an orchestra. You got a ragtag band of people just playing instruments and screaming and stuff like that. And so you don't have the discipline to play together, first of all. And then to know what to play is the second piece. So it's quite a journey, and it does take that sort of that, yes, we're going to do it. And the top down, it takes a leadership thing.
Yeah.
It says we're going to a better land. You need to follow me. And this isn't a test. This is not a demo. This is not a pilot. This is the way we're going to do it. And when it happens, it's beautiful.
Yeah. I have to imagine there's a lot of fear, particularly from the leadership perspective of like, oh God, can I do this? Do you find anything helps people step through that fear? Is there a talk you give or a line you like to share?
We do a lot of that. We actually do. We also do leadership coaching. We've got some certified coaches, because sometimes you just really need to take someone aside and talk to them about it. But we use a more proactive model that seems to work pretty well. Then we follow up with some spot coaching and the like. But the real thing is to get people aligned on what the real problems are that we're solving. And I gave you several of the narratives here today, right? And then just sort of show them the path and say, if you go this way and have a little faith, you're going to see these things get better. And we can show you case studies and evidence that it works and all that kind of thing. But it is a leap of faith. And to be honest, if you had 100-person organization, there'd probably be 5 to 8 people on average. Some organizations, no one, some organizations more, but 5% or so of the people will leave. Yeah. As they'll say, this is not, we had one, a VP of content or senior director of content or something who said, this is great, but I like telling people what to do. So we're great. All right. Tried to fit in for a while, and then the next time I visited the agency, he was gone. Where'd he go? He left. So okay, you don't need to lay anyone off. They'll get allergic to actually all the good times that are going on. So. Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, but I think that's okay. Some people that's how they're wired, and if that's what they want, you go find a place that's... There are plenty of organizations out there that want them. Absolutely. Oh, yes. Probably way too many, but yes. Yeah. So, you talked about the name change, is there more to that story? What's coming up for you guys? What's the next
kind of big step for you guys.
We've been very focused on solving what we think is essentially the biggest problem in delivery inside of an organization, and especially agencies, but other project-driven consultancies. We work with consultancies and internal development organizations inside of corporations, right?
Yeah.
Including the marketing organizations, stuff like that. But we've been solving that, and we're just good at it. That stuff works. It has really proven thing. But when you start fixing that, then there's a famous Japanese business guy, a business theorist and scientist, Taiichi Ono, who he did the Toyota production system, but he had this great saying, and he said, when you lower the water in the river, you can see the rocks. Okay. And so what essentially we're doing, sort of a lowering the water in the river, we're removing the biggest problem, the biggest blockage that had all the water backed up and all that. You do that, and all of a sudden you start seeing all these other problems coming up. And we have an 18-point diagnostic that we run now that covers everything from all the way, starting at hello to the client, how we're presenting ourselves, all the way to how was that, and so there's a much larger scope for these things. And just like we talked about all the misery you can relieve by doing the things we talked about today, there are a bunch of other spots there as well. And so it's turning from really, how do we get the work out the door, to how do we make it a great workplace? How do we, and the name Better Company is intended, like, I think most good brands to have multiple meanings, like, being a better company makes you better company to your people, and they're better company at home, and all that sort of thing. So
yeah, I love that. I mean, I think that certainly syncs up with some of the areas I'm passionate about. I think about things like, culture and just finding space for our humanity at work, and being able to show up as ourselves, and show up in a way where we can feel connected to the people we work with. And a lot of that requires making the experience great, and making it one that you want to keep showing up for, and making it one that makes you feel proud and happy, and supported. So I think
I'm gonna jump in on it real quick, is that I meant to mention this. So we didn't set out to make better workplace cultures, right? I mean, we literally, I came from program management side, and I was like, I knew people would be happier if it wasn't such a shit show. Okay, I was trying to relieve some pain. And I'll tell you, about half of our clients get tangible business results. Like, we've got improved margin, or our on-time delivery rate has jumped, and, all those sorts of things. About half of them. The other half don't, but they love us. And when I ask why, they go, we didn't really get any of those numbers, but our culture is amazing. Okay. And it is one. And, if I advertise we improve cultures, no one would buy, because it's like, well, you can't improve my culture. That kind of thing. But cultures are a symptom of things. A good culture is a symptom of things going well, right? And that was one of the nice surprises and wonderful surprises out of our work.
Yeah, it's funny. That reminds me, there's a guy we had on the show a while back. His name's Jason Fried, and he runs a company, 30
I know Jason.
Signals. Jason's awesome.
Yeah. He's awesome. Yeah.
And his whole view on culture is kind of what you're saying. It's kind of like, it's how you show up, and then you can kind of look at how did you show up the last 60 days. That was your culture, but you feel it, you notice it, and just, I think his systems, remind me a little bit of what you're doing, which is really simplifying things, keeping people out of the way, pulling out all of the unnecessary, and letting people just do their damn jobs. And that's a pretty good culture.
Yeah. He and I were speaking at a conference, to just adjacent to each other at the conference agenda. Ended up going out to dinner with him that night, and we had a great conversation on all kinds of things. But he actually even gave me a quote, because I was saying, like, your organization may have gotten too big. Okay, if you don't know how to deal with size, then organizations grow, especially agencies, grow less happy as they get larger. 25 person agency, sweet spot, beautiful place to work, feels like a family. 50 person agency turns to chaos. 100 person agency, don't ask. Okay. That's that sort of profile. And Jason stood up at the conference and said, no one ever complains about not being as large as they were. Okay. Right. And if you know anything about him, he actually keeps his company.
He does.
And now I think the company's now called Basecamp. Actually, they changed the name, but
Yeah,
less than 50 people is his rule, right?
it's
I don't want a
remarkable.
company of more than 50 people. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Well, real quick here, I know we want to wrap up, but a couple of quick questions. One is, and I think you've kind of answered this, but I'll just throw it out for you. If you could wave a magic wand and kind of fully desuckify the workplace, what does that look like?
The result in the workplace.
Yeah. What is,
Okay.
yeah. What is the end result?
I think it's a fairly flat organization. I think you can't be totally flat. There's a lot of research into this that even like cooperatives, which is like the ultimate flat organization, like a farming cooperative and the like, still needs some structure on it. And that's good. I mean, that makes sense and the like. And ironically, a lot of women's cooperatives are headed by a man. It's just weird stuff like that, but whatever. So but I think that's you start to see a flatter workplace and one where title and power and control aren't as dominant as they are now.
Yeah, I think a lot of people could go along with that program. So the last question I like to ask before we give people a chance to know where to find you is, I use sound effects a lot on my show. They show up in the intros and outros. If you've got one that you'd like to share, it could be.
I got it for you now. Okay.
Yeah. What do you got? Can you do it again?
Sound of applause. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the people being happy about how much fun it is to work where they work now.
Can you do that one more time? Yeah. I mean, I think there's something, who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want to feel that sense of like, yeah, we did it and this is awesome. So yeah, last question is just, how do people find you and get to know more about the awesome work you're doing?
So you can find me, of course, LinkedIn is my preferred way. We put everything we come up with in terms of content. I'm always publishing new ideas and articles. Just did a cool one on the $1 million margin massacre, which is how we're losing $1 million a year in most agencies just to bad scoping and the like. Ooh, but connect with me or follow me on LinkedIn. You can of course look at Agency Agile, or there's also Better Company will be there depending on when this airs. If you want to read like sort of the backstory and the like, I do highly recommend my new book available on Amazon called Unmanaged, and it's a little bit of a diary of what we've learned and the like, and there's some tips in there as well, but it's not a recipe for organizational transformation as much as it is personal transformation. So you will become a better manager by reading it, I believe. So
I love that. I'm going to add it to my list for sure. And I hope everybody picks up a copy because I think a less managed world sounds like a pretty nice world to me.
Me too.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Jack. I appreciate you coming on the show. We'll talk to you soon.
TJ, great conversation. I'm so delighted that you have the background that you did, which just made it awesome for you to be able to connect with my examples because of the industry thing. So
yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Thank you very much again. A real joy.
All right. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the DesuckifyWork Podcast. And thanks to Jack for bringing a fresh perspective and a ton of hope to the show. You can follow Jack on LinkedIn, where he shares everything and anything he's working on. Check out his site at agencyagile.com, and please buy his book, Unmanaged, which should be a must-read for everyone in agency land. Speaking of reading, there are all kinds of words on my site, and even more on my Substack. Most of them even make sense. If you want to make sense of the role work plays in your life, let's set up a free 30-minute "What the heck is coaching all about" call. I've been told I'm an excellent listener by several people. At least I think that's what they said. Bye, everyone.